Hello and welcome back to Shakespeare and Film. I hope that everybody is healthy and safe. Everybody's all right. So we're going to get right into things. I have another sponsor for this week. This week, your video is brought to you by Lady Macbeth. Oh boy, she's so special, isn't she? A wonderful photograph of great actress Amy Schuart as Lady Macbeth in 1960. And the reason she is our sponsor is because she has gone viral 400 years later with her very famous "out damn spot" speech from Macbeth, right? Surely you have seen some iteration of this meme going all over the internet. It's a wonderful example of how Shakespeare's language just goes on and on. This is her lines: "Out damn spot, out I say, 1, 2. Why then, 'tis time to do it. Hell is murky. Fie, my lord, fie. A soldier and afeard? What need we fear who knows it when none can call our power to account? Yet who would have thought that old man to have had so much blood in him?" So this is that great sleepwalking scene where she's kind of obsessively trying to wash the blood from her hands because she's complicit in the murder. Right? And of course, it's turned into a wonderful meme to remind us how to wash our hands properly. So thank you, Lady Macbeth, 400 years after the fact. Today, we have a lot to do. I am going to guide you through another writing exercise that I hope can perhaps help you toward your final project. We'll talk about your responses to Laurence Olivier's Hamlet, and then we will to Asta Nielsen's Hamlet, and then we will talk about Shakespeare's Macbeth, which you are expected to read this week. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with our writing prompt. As you know by now, instead of a scholarly paper that I would have expected you to work on if we were in person together on campus, we're doing a slightly more creative option in which you are keeping some kind of diary of this time, whether it's through the writing exercises that we are doing together in these videos, whether it's some other creative project that you are going to be working on. And we'll be workshopping these this week, and you'll be receiving emails from me reminding you of when we will be meeting this week to talk about those. So in preparation for that, let's do our writing exercise. All right, so to do this, as always, I'd like you to get out your notebook. I've got my notebook. I've got my pen. This will take about 6 minutes. So to begin, very simple. We're going to use patterns of repetition to document what we are experiencing right now. And for the first 3-minute exercise, I would like you to write 5 lines that begin with the phrase, "I remember." You can write whatever you like as long as it's unique to your experience. So what phrases could you write for 3 minutes that are "I remember" phrases that help you recall something very, very specific and vivid from the past? Okay, go. Okay, time's up. And here's the second part of that writing activity. So the first 3 minutes were spent writing 5 lines that begin with the phrase I remember. So this was an exercise that was meant to help you think about the past. Here's what I'd like you to do for the next 3 minutes. Write 5 lines that begin with the phrase I wish. So I borrowed this writing activity from actually an activity that I read about for my 7-year-old son in order to help children look forward to the future of a time without staying at home for a time after the coronavirus. I read somewhere that children should keep a wish jar of all the things they would like to do after this time of quarantine. And I thought that was a really nice, hopeful thing to do with children and a nice way to keep track of what our desires for the future. So for the next 3 minutes, write 5 lines that begin with the phrase I wish, and again, write whatever you like as long as only you are the one who could write it. Something very vivid, something very specific. That's the key to success. Okay, go. Okay, we're all done. You can close that part of your notebook now. I don't know if that felt long or short to you. It felt short to me. I had plenty of things that I realized that I want to do once all of this is over. I'm really missing going to the movies. I'm really missing. We don't go out to eat that much because we cook at home a lot, but I do like at least being able to go out to eat if I wanted to. I look forward to sitting in a restaurant again and being surrounded by people. Um, I have a friend whose birthday is tomorrow, and I look forward, when all of this is done, I look forward to celebrating her birthday with a bunch of people. That'll be nice. So I had some very specific things that are unique to my life, and I hope you found that you were able to write down a few things too. Okay, so let's segue from our writing time into our discussion of Asta Nielsen. All right. Um, I loved your responses. They were so good. Several of them made me so excited because it's clear that you're as intrigued by Asta Nielsen as I am. And that made me so happy. So let me just give you a couple of examples of the Moodle responses that really leapt out at me. Here's one from Aditi. I really enjoyed this one. She writes, I was genuinely surprised watching Asta Nielsen's Hamlet by how much I liked it. What I especially like about this movie is everyone's acting. Incredible acting. Not a single word was spoken, yet the messages were clearly delivered. Asta Nielsen is a great, great actor. She is a gem. I agree, Aditi. Those wide, coal rim, wide eyes, her expressions, the active inner struggle between hiding her femininity behind the masculine facade. To be honest, I think I prefer silent movies now. Okay, that was worth the whole experiment, you know? I didn't know what you would think of silent film. And here you go. I love seeing this excitement. This is precisely why I wanted to share this film with you. For us as film goers and TV fans, we are actually very sophisticated in the 21st century because our shows and films that we're watching really force us to grasp pieces of information together. In really sophisticated ways. But I love that you were able to see that silent film forces you to do that as well. So, with that in mind, I want to look at a scene that several of you were really concerned with or interested in. But I want to look at one more comment from Aditi. This is really nice. Beautiful writing in these Moodle responses, by the way. One scene in the movie that intrigued me was the one where Hamlet dies in the arms of Horatio. Horatio tries to look at the wound and then realizes Hamlet was a woman this whole time. He then kisses her, saying something along the lines of, if only I had known that you were a woman. Now, this is so interesting to me. Now, I love reading Asta Nielsen as a woman cross-dressed as a man, who clearly has desire for her friend Horatio, who clearly has no idea that she's a woman until she's dead. And you might read that and think, well, that's a pretty straight moment. It's a pretty hetero moment. Okay, maybe, but what was Horatio thinking the whole time he was friends with Hamlet? Which is to say, why is his first thought, oh, I could have loved you, if I had known this? That's the first thought he has. That is very interesting, and it allows me to really think about homosocial relations in Hamlet in a very, very interesting way. Let's take a moment and look at what Aditi is talking about in this film. I'm gonna shut off the music for a moment just so we can focus on the motions of what's happening, okay? We have the servant who's, of course, putting the poison drink into the second cup, and at this moment, evil Gertrude thinks that that's a cup that's full of safe wine. Meanwhile, it's a cup full of poison. Look at Asta Nielsen. She's so good. She's in the duel scene. Gertrude realizes she's drunk the poison. And then, just at that moment, Hamlet is wounded. Oh, and look, Horatio's trying to open her shirt. She's like, oh, no, don't do that. Nope, I'm keeping my shirt shut. Look at her. Even in her last throes of death, she doesn't want to reveal her identity. Oh, here come the troops coming in to invade. She's like, no, I have to keep my shirt closed. Horatio's embracing her. Very interesting. He closes her eyes. Ooh. Only death betrays your secret that you had the golden heart of a woman. Too late to be lovers. Too late. Wow, that is so great. Isn't that fascinating that that's his first instinct in this version of the film? Very, very good. And then he kisses, oh yeah, and then he kisses her. And then he kisses her. That's his first instinct with all of the chaos going on. Gertrude dying of the poison. Laertes in the duel with Hamlet. The troops are coming in. This is what Horatio's focused on. This gives me a new insight into Horatio that I don't know if I would have had if I only had Shakespeare's text. Very, very nice. So let's look at another scene. Really, your responses were so good this week. I love them. Here's one from Crystal. I'll try to put myself over here. She was very interested in Act 1, Scene 2, in the coronation wedding scene. She says, I'm going to be honest here. Oh, sorry. It says, I think this... Oh, no. Sorry. I got to go ahead. No, this is still Aditi. She's talking about that scene where Hamlet dies. She says, I think this scene gives so much for us to think about. What if Hamlet revealed this secret to Horatio? Maybe he would have helped her. Maybe he would have fallen in love with her. Might have helped her ascend the throne. Maybe he would have helped assassinate Claudius. Maybe he could have lifted her up from this whirlpool of sadness, helped her see something more outside the realm of avenging her late father. There are endless possibilities. So Aditi, thank you for your beautiful Moodle response. This is a great example of how adaptations of Shakespeare's films, this one is a wild adaptation, obviously. Anybody looking for a more conservative, traditional, by the book kind of treatment of Shakespeare's Hamlet is going to be disappointed by Asta Nielsen's version. But what Aditi's response shows us is how this adaptation can really crack open his plays and give us all kinds of insights into the characters we wouldn't have had otherwise. Very, very nicely done. Okay, so now we'll go to Crystal's response. Beautiful response, Crystal. I'll get myself out of the way here. Hopefully, okay. This is Crystal. I am going to be honest here and say that the main reason Hamlet's my favorite Shakespeare play is because I fell in love with his character when watching Kenneth Branagh's version in high school, and I wouldn't have thought this rendition could be topped, but Nielsen definitely does. That's huge. I mean, Crystal, that's a big claim. I gotta be honest with you, there are parts of Asta Nielsen's film that I like even better than Kenneth Branagh's version, and Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet is truly my favorite. So that it's really saying something very impressive. I didn't particularly like Olivier's Hamlet. It felt almost too forced, and especially after watching this version, there's just an ease to Nielsen's Hamlet that felt most fitting. When she walks in on the funeral marriage feast in that cape, wowza. Yeah, I know, wowza. I agree. It's absolutely stunning. Let's look at just, again, I really want us to pay attention to the wonderful performance techniques that Asta Nielsen is capable of. I'm going to try to find this spot that Crystal's talking about. There it is. So this is the wedding banquet. This is Claudius and Gertrude trying to celebrate their rather hasty wedding. Hamlet is walking in. He's newly aware that the marriage is being consecrated. Let's see what the acting looks like. And again, I have it muted just because sound is so tinny in these recordings. So I want that cape. Look at the smoke framing her head as she comes down the stairs. How lithe she is. How, she's kind of skinny. Just a black, melancholic figure. And look at that cape as this is the power of the long shot, right, Crystal? Long shot in the distance. Very quickly, Hamlet walks in like a black storm. They're having a great time away with the last sign of grief. It is a happy day for us. Yeah, give me a break. And then they see Hamlet. Look at that reaction shot. You see that? Oh my God, she's so good. She goes up to the dais. They're alarmed to see her. They didn't know she was coming. That hand gesture and that running away. God, she's so good. She's so, just with that, that hand gesture and the look on her face, she's able to give so much emotional intensity and complexity to what Hamlet is feeling at that moment. So I absolutely agree with you, Crystal. Just a beautiful moment. Again, look at the reaction shots of evil Claudius and Gertrude. They're so horrible in this film. I love it. Let's jump ahead to something that Kaylee, she did if anyone's interested in how to do an analysis of a shot, boy, Kaylee, you did a real nice job this week. Kaylee wanted to pay attention to the moment in which Hamlet, Hamlet modifies the death decree in which Claudius says that Hamlet should die, and instead Hamlet etches that out and writes that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern should die. This is really nice. So let's look at what Kaylee has to say about this. She says the scene is done in a yellow tint which contrasts there being outside, which had a blue tint. So I like that attention to the hand tinting of the film. This scene is taken in a long shot for the majority, but switches to medium shots when it concentrates on a specific character, and some close-ups as well. Hamlet's entrance is taken as a long shot with deep focus as he appears from the outside of the castle and walks into the throne room before Fortinbras. After this, there are a lot of key reaction shots and character movements to consider. When Hamlet appears before Fortinbras, he bows, and it flips to a medium shot of Fortinbras recognizing Hamlet and smiling upon his friend. Let's see that moment. There's that great black cape again. Geez, she's so fashion forward. There's the bow. Fortinbras is very happy to see Hamlet. They're friends in this film. Kind of interesting. I greet you, King Fortinbras. He's like, enough with the formalities. Give me a hug. And again, you can see with his body language that he's doing that. Isn't that interesting? Again, kind of in a distant shot, long shot. Let me introduce you to my friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. You see what she's doing with her body. They bow to Fortinbras. They give him the decree. This is where title cards and text are really important to silent film. For important reasons of state and despite all objections, immediately execute these two men, right? To the executioner's block with both of them. Wow, that's great. And of course, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are shocked, right? You can see this is their reaction shot, and the medium shot as they walk away. Oh, that's so good. Look at her knowing look, her grin. Isn't that wonderful? And Kaylee goes on. Fortinbras looks at Hamlet for confirmation of what the letter says. Hamlet shrugs, and then Fortinbras sends the duo off to be beheaded. We get their medium reaction shot of shock looking back at Hamlet and Fortinbras. It then reverts to a long shot, and Hamlet and Fortinbras walk away together talking. They then unite hands. I thought this, and this is, Kaylee, very nice response. I thought this entire scene was an interesting interpretation and a good play on the politics in this play. The last film we watched omitted the heavy presence of Fortinbras and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. That was Olivier's version. But in this film, I like the way that in the beginning Hamlet was unsure of whether or not he should befriend Fortinbras because of past conflicts, but then he decides to make amends. That was crucial for his future because Fortinbras becomes a big ally of his. So I like, Kaylee, how you really focused in on this scene in a really valuable way, and it helped you think a little bit more about the political dimensions of how power circulates in Shakespeare's Hamlet, and how that's useful in a creative way for Asta Nielsen in this version of Hamlet. There's so much more that we could say about this magnificent film. I didn't see everybody replying to this yet on Moodle, but if you haven't yet, I hope you will. It's just such a hoot. And I do hope that this means that some of you will feel better prepared for watching silent film in the future, whether it's Shakespearean film or something else. It's really quite an adventure. I'd like us to shift our attention now to Macbeth, which is a play that I think many of you have already read, probably in high school. But if you haven't, I want to be sure that you have enough cultural context to understand how this play differs from some of the others that we've read, and maybe guide you with a few questions that you might consider. All right? So, as you might know, Macbeth, at least among actors and directors, actually has another name. A lot of them refer to it as the Scottish play. In fact, a lot of actors and directors and movie and film folks, they won't refer to this play as Macbeth at all. They call it the Scottish play. Well, why is that? There's a lot of superstition surrounding this play, and one of the reasons for that is because there have been multiple productions over the centuries where actors or directors or people involved in the theater have been harmed during productions of Macbeth, physically harmed. It's really quite remarkable. It seems as if there are terrible accidents that are like a hex on this play. So, for example, in the year 1672, the actor who played Lady Macbeth was having an affair with the actor who played Macbeth, which would have been fine, except that the actor playing King Duncan was her husband. Kind of saucy. One night, the murder scene was particularly bloody, and the actor who played King Duncan didn't return for his curtain call, and Macbeth, the actor who played Macbeth, served a life sentence for his all-too-realistic murder. Okay, there we go. So last week you watched Laurence Olivier's Hamlet. It might interest you to know that he also played Macbeth. When he played the title role in 1937, he narrowly escaped death as a heavy weight swung from the flyloft above, crushing the chair where he had been seated until moments before. Oh my goodness, it's horrible. A 1942 production of Macbeth that was directed by and starred John Gielgud had 4 fatalities during its run, including 2 of the witches and the actor who played King Duncan. The set was quickly repainted and used for light comedy. And then in that light comedy, the lead actor died suddenly during that production. So lots of bad luck here. When Stanislavski, the great Russian director, mounted an elaborate production of Macbeth, the actor playing Macbeth forgot his lines during a dress rehearsal and signaled to the prompter several times, but with no success. So he was trying to get the prompter with his lines to say, hey, what are my lines? What are my lines? Finally, the actor playing Macbeth went down to the prompt box and found the prompter dead, clutching his script. Stanislavski canceled the entire run immediately. These are crazy stories. There's no play in Shakespeare's corpus, or maybe in any of the dramatic texts that we know of, where so many just lousy luck, bad luck things happen. Okay, so there's all kinds of weirdness and superstition surrounding this play. Why? Why is it regarded with so much superstition? Well, first of all, it's a very supernatural play, right? We know from Hamlet, which we've been paying attention to for the past 3 weeks, Hamlet's a very supernatural play as well. We have immediately, in the very first scene of the play, an encounter and a discussion of a ghost, and that's an encounter that's negotiated throughout the whole play. Well, we have witches in Macbeth that seem to have an enormous amount of power. And so the witches or weird sisters, they play a very big role in this play. We also have the ghost of Banquo visiting Macbeth at dinner, which is really one of the most terrifying scenes in all of theater history. It's horrible. So let's talk about the witches for a minute. When we hear witch, we think it's sort of a funny Halloween thing. Witches, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of witches in my life. I don't have any, in fact. Never met any. I've dressed as a witch once or twice for Halloween, but it's sort of a Halloweeny thing. But these witches that you're going to encounter in Macbeth are very, very scary. And I want you to keep in mind some historical context and how scary witches were in the medieval period and in the Renaissance. Now, a little bit of cultural context. Shakespeare wrote this play. We know that it was first staged for King James. It was first performed for him at Hampton Court. So this is one of his many palaces, beautiful, big inside spaces where King James would be there with his courtiers and his ladies and his queen, all these dukes and duchesses, and they would be seated and watch Shakespeare's actors play the Macbeth. Okay, so it was first played for King James in 1606. Okay, now that's kind of interesting because by this point, King James had been King of England for a little, maybe just under 3 years. Why else is it interesting? Throughout his reign, King James was very concerned about assassination. He was very concerned about plots to overthrow him. He was very concerned about insurrections against the government. Why would that have been? Well, just the year before, in 1605, there was, let me see if I can get you a little picture here. There was a plot to blow up Parliament. And the conspirators almost succeeded. This was known as the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. It's still celebrated as Guy Fawkes Day in England. It's something that has a lot of resonance for people in the culture. So in 1605, Guy Fawkes attempts to blow up the Parliament building with gunpowder casks in the basement full of explosives. Fawkes and his conspirators were embittered by what they saw as King James's hostility to Roman Catholicism, and they wanted to overthrow the government. This was no joke. I mean, this was almost the 9/11 of 1605. You know what I'm saying? It was a very, very serious threat to the government, and luckily, the conspiracy they were caught, no one was harmed, but they were executed, and it was a national it sort of instilled some real panic in ordinary people. So what do we know about King James? Why was he so concerned about insurrection? Partly because of the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, partly because he was traumatized by the fact that both of his parents were murdered by conspirators, partly because his ascendancy to the English throne, there was some controversy surrounding that because he was like a second cousin to Queen Elizabeth, who died in 1603 with no heirs. He was a Scottish king. He was not an English king. So there were plenty of English subjects who were concerned about King James and his loyalty to England. They weren't entirely convinced that he was the right king for England, and King James knew that. He was aware of that and very concerned about his reception in England, about whether he would be able to not only secure the throne but keep it. And he was able to. He was able to have a full reign. He reigned in England until 1625, and he had a number of accomplishments. He was the facilitator who sponsored the King James Bible that was completed in 1611. There are many Protestant denominations that still use the King James Bible translation in their services, so that is a real cultural contribution. He was a lover of literature and the theater arts and supported those in many ways. He was a big part of the English colonizing project, which we've been discussing in my Global Renaissance seminar. So his reign was a pretty important one during this time in England. But throughout his reign, he was very concerned about insurrection, about violence in the court. And he was very interested in witches and witchcraft. And in fact, he wrote a book about it, if you can imagine. Imagine a king writing about such a thing. His book was called Demonology. He wrote it in 1603. He was an amazingly intelligent and astute monarch, very interesting person. But I'm bringing all of this cultural context up because I just want you to be aware that not only were witches something that were considered very threatening and powerful in the Renaissance, but specifically for King James, they were very powerful and threatening. So how interesting would it have been to be Shakespeare in 1606 asking his actors to perform this kind of play about ghosts and witchcraft and murder of a king at King James's court? It's fascinating. It's really thrilling. And again, as I said, it might interest you to know that King James was the descendant of a historical figure, Scottish figure called Banquo. So when King James sees Banquo in Shakespeare's Macbeth, he's seeing like a great uncle of his, right? And so when Banquo is a good guy who unfortunately is murdered in the play, but his lineage is continued throughout Scottish royalty. How interesting would it have been for King James to see Banquo and think, oh, that's a guy on my family tree, and he's a good guy in this play. How interesting, right? A lot of what you're seeing in Shakespeare's Macbeth is legend, it's lore. A lot of it is drawn from a book called Holinshed's Chronicles. This was a history of the mid-1500s. It was updated and edited multiple times. It was a huge source text for Shakespeare, not just for Macbeth, but for several of his plays. Is it historiography as we understand it today? It's not that same level of accuracy. A lot of what's in here is legend, propaganda. Even so, it's important to be aware that Shakespeare had multiple kinds of books on his desktop as he was writing Macbeth and some of his other tragedies. And in Holinshed, Banquo, the ancestor to King James, actually helps Macbeth with the murders that you'll see on stage when you read this play. But for propagandistic reasons, Shakespeare decided to transform Banquo from fellow thug to a virtuous man who wants nothing to do with murder. That seemed like an appropriate thing for Shakespeare to do. He wasn't a dummy. Okay, so what else? So when you read this play this week, you need to keep one foot in the world of the original Macbeth, the 17th century Macbeth that's always looking back to Holinshed's Chronicles and to an old medieval sort of legendary period in Scotland. That's kind of interesting. Okay, so let's get into the play a little bit. First thing we know about Macbeth is how valiant he is as a warrior, right? So, Act 1, Scene 2, after we have a very brief interlude introducing us to the witches who are terrifying, we just received reports from a captain coming in from the battlefield, right? So there's been a rebellion from MacDonald. Macbeth is quick to help quell it. He's brave, he's victorious, he's valorous. He's just awesome, right? So here's how the captain describes Macbeth in battle. For brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name, disdaining fortune with his brandished steel, that's his sword, right? Right, it's like Thor, which smoked with bloody execution like Valor's minion, carved out his passage till he faced the slave, and the slave is the traitor, MacDonald. Raw, he's like going like this, he's just killing people left and right. He gets right to the slave, MacDonald, which ne'er shook hands nor bade farewell to him, till he unseamed him from the nave, like his abdomen, to the chops, and fixed his head upon our battlements. So Macbeth sees MacDonald. He starts with his sword in the abdomen, goes straight up to the neck, and then beheads him. Wow. So Macbeth is like this incredibly brave warrior. He's like, so cinematic, right? Great description of Macbeth. Okay. And so why is that important? The king of Scotland, Duncan, is thrilled with Macbeth's courageous performance, and so initially Macbeth is presented to us as a military hero. But by the time we meet him, Macbeth in the play, Macbeth is no longer busy with the business of war. And this is a serious problem, okay? So this is a recurring theme in Shakespeare's plays. If you've ever read Othello, you know that once Othello, the Moor of Venice, is done with a military campaign in Cyprus, that's when his troubles with jealousy really begin. Perhaps because, in part, he has time on his hands to be bothered by jealousy. Another great revenge tragedy by Shakespeare is called Titus Andronicus. He finds himself in a similar situation after being at war with the Goths for years on behalf of the Roman Empire. Titus Andronicus returns home to Rome, and that's when everything falls apart for him and his family. So there's a recurrent concern in the Renaissance and for Shakespeare's characters where we see men or male characters who are incredibly courageous and patriotic in the military realm, and they fall apart in the domestic or political realm. And this was a common concern among dramatists in the period. So just that's something to keep in mind, is that Macbeth may be an incredible warrior, but he may not be so great as a ruler or as someone who relates to other people when it's not a time of war. So that's kind of interesting to me. Another thing you have to keep an eye out for is, as I said at the beginning, these weird sisters, the witches, right? Right after he's valorous in battle, Macbeth has his encounters with the weird sisters, and they are weird, right? Banquo says this. He's with Macbeth when Macbeth sees the weird sisters, and Banquo says, "What are these? So withered and so wild in their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth and yet are on it." So directors and actors have had a field day with this description because it could mean anything. Like they're on Earth, but they don't look like anything I've seen on Earth before. These witches could look like anything, right? Very interesting. So these are the weird sisters. And of course, I love the Oxford English Dictionary. What does weird mean when we look it up in the OED? Well, look at this. It's from the Middle English word or Scottish weird. There are other spelling variants. Weird, 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 right? The etymology says originally an attributive use of weird in the weird sisters. The later currency and adjectival use being derived from the occurrence of this in the story of Macbeth. Interesting. Okay, very nice. So the first definition, and this is the one that is of interest to us, having the power to control the fate or destiny of human beings. Later, claiming the supernatural power of dealing with fate or destiny. How interesting. So in Act 1, Scene 2, you have Macbeth, who seems like he is so in control of his fate, and he's so valorous in battle. But then, with this encounter with the weird sisters, you realize they're the ones who are in control of his fate or his destiny. Very, very interesting. When Macbeth first meets the weird sisters, they don't introduce themselves. They don't imply what their motives might be or how they've acquired their intelligence about Macbeth. Their first words to Macbeth are their famous prophecy. And it looks something like this. Is very famous, right? All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. All hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. All hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter. So that's their prophecy. Now, when they give this prophecy to Macbeth, he's only the Thane of Glamis, which is he's like a noble person of Glamis. And he's like, okay, that's me. And then just after this encounter with the witches, he is named Thane of Cawdor. And he's like, wait a minute, maybe the witches are right. If they were right about me being Thane of Glamis and Thane of Cawdor, that must mean that I should be king. How can I become king? And so that instantly reveals to us just how ambitious he is for power and how he sets that in motion very quickly in this play. With that in mind, let's take a moment to think about Lady Macbeth. Certainly one of the greatest characters, women characters in all of Shakespeare, and she's just phenomenal in this play. I love, love, love her. Some great lines. So in the very next scene after Macbeth's encounter with the Weird Sisters, the play quickly takes us to the bedchamber of Lady Macbeth, who reads news of Macbeth's promotion to Thane of Cawdor in his letter. So in this early scene, we get a clear sense of how close Macbeth and his wife are. He writes to her immediately after his military victory and right after he's had his encounter with the witches. And Lady Macbeth feels like his equal. She can read the letter, and reading in this time period was not entirely common in the Renaissance, so that's a big deal. And like Macbeth, Lady Macbeth is a character who undergoes an immediate transformation on stage. So she reads Macbeth's letter, announcing his victory, his appointment as Thane of Cawdor, and she goes to the side of the stage and she begins invoking the spirits. And that's really interesting. She starts acting like she's creating a charm or an invocation to spirits, just like a witch would. Very interesting. Look what she says. "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. Unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. Stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it." Ah, she's so awesome. She's basically saying, unsex me here. Transform me from a woman who might be kind. Transform me from a woman who might typically be capable of pity and remorse. Take me away from my womanish nature. Unsex me here and make thick my blood. Make me cruel. Make me have a sense of purpose and I can execute my purpose. Ah, she's so amazing. This is our very first meeting with Lady Macbeth, calling upon these spirits from the deep. From this moment on, the play really moves forward at a breakneck speed. Lady Macbeth convinces her husband that they should stop at nothing to fulfill the prophecy of his kingship. She and Macbeth host a party in honor of the recent victory at battle. And by Act 2, the King of Scotland and his son Donalbain are already dead. Like, the action in this play is unbelievable. It's like the opposite of Hamlet, who spends 4 hours trying to figure out how to kill Claudius, right? Meanwhile, boom, this is action all the time. So unlike Hamlet, Macbeth doesn't have anything close to the epistemological crisis that Hamlet has about killing Claudius. Certainly Macbeth thinks a lot about it after he does the killing, but not beforehand. And that's a really huge problem for him. Okay, so what else can I tell you? After the murder of the king and other murders to follow, Lady Macbeth, is cursed with sleepwalking. Macbeth is cursed with being unable to sleep. I'd like you to think about those two maladies and how they afflict both of them. The banquet scene, there's some really amazing psychological work that Macbeth is doing in the banquet scene, where he thinks he sees the ghost of Banquo, and it really makes him crazy, right? He's so unsettled by Banquo's ghost. But what does he actually see? It's hard to tell from the play text. He might be seeing, like, you could play this scene as if Banquo, an actor playing Banquo, is actually there, and the audience can see Banquo, and Macbeth can see Banquo, but the other guests at the banquet can't. Or you could play it where no one is there, and Macbeth is just speaking to the air, and both audience and banquet attendees are very concerned with his sanity. So there's a lot of different ways that directors and actors have had fun with these multiple interpretations of what to do with Shakespeare's text. So let's go back to Lady Macbeth for a minute. So as I said, she's cursed with a bad case of sleepwalking that suggests to us that even if she keeps saying, unsex me here, let me be cruel, let me be a person of action, it's clear that she is plagued by doubts about what she has done. So her waiting lady calls upon a physician to see her while she's giving us her famous hand washing scene while she's sleepwalking. The doctor watches this sleepwalking scene. It's so famous. And, she says, out, damn spot, out, I say. The doctor sees her washing her hands compulsively. And he concludes that she doesn't have a medical condition, but a spiritual problem, an ethical problem, moral problem. He can tell something's wrong. And he says this: foul whisperings are abroad. Unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their deaf pillows will discharge their secrets. More needs she the divine than to visit. She doesn't need a doctor. She needs a conversation with a priest. God, forgive us all. Look after her. Remove from her the means of all annoyance, and still keep eyes upon her. This is a clue of how she's going to die. We don't have a clear sense of exactly what happens to Lady Macbeth and how she dies. It's very possible, though, that she commits suicide. And the doctor is showing that he's worried about that here. He says, try to keep her from harming herself. Everybody keep an eye on her. So good night. My mind she has mated and amazed my sight. I think but dare not speak. Unbelievable. He's saying that just by watching her, his own mind has now been disturbed, right? Elsewhere in Renaissance drama, there are a lot of stagings of ineffective doctors, all of which provide social critiques of medicine in the period. I don't think this is providing a social critique, though. This isn't meant to ridicule the doctor at all. It's a very earnest passage. And it's really showing us the rarity and severity of Lady Macbeth's troubled mind. And the doctor, he's never seen anything before quite like this. And it's very, very disturbing to him and to us. So, of course, the doctor's words foreshadow what will happen to Lady Macbeth. And as the play draws to a close, Macbeth is in the midst of a new military campaign to save his kingship when Lady Macbeth kills herself, or at least there's the suggestion of it. And when Macbeth hears the news of her death, let me see if I go there. This is what he says. He says she should have died hereafter. You think, what does that mean? That she should have died at a time when we could have properly acknowledged her, not at a time of war. Her suicide results in some of Macbeth's most famous and nihilistic lines. And when I say nihilistic, I just mean so hopeless, so fatalistic, so just full of nothing. Look what he says. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty place from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Oh my God, that's so good. What's he saying? Out, out, brief candle. So, Lady Macbeth has died. Life is but a walking shadow. It's just nothing. It's not real. It's just a shadow of a thing. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage. He's comparing life to an actor on the stage. And as soon as the actor leaves the stage, there's nothing there. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying. What if acting and actors are just idiots on a stage? And when they leave, there's nothing left. Not only is Macbeth telling us something about the meaning of life, which for him is nothing, but he's also calling into question what's happening on the stage. What if the work of the actors just means nothing? That's always the threat, isn't it? Very, very interesting, very disturbing. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And I'm going to leave you with some questions that I hope will guide you toward what might become some fruitful Moodle responses. So here are some questions. What are we to do with the power of the supernatural and foreknowledge of the future in this play? Why does the play begin with witchcraft? What kind of power, if any, does Macbeth have over his destiny? What do other kind of power do other characters have over their destiny? So the play seems to end with Malcolm in power, and Malcolm seems to provide the possibility of stability and order and hope for Scotland. But where are the witches? He is the fate that the witches foretold. But if he's fulfilling the prophecy, why should they stop there? Will they visit Malcolm? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Maybe you can speculate on what role foreknowledge and the supernatural have in this play. Here's another question. Is any leader immune to the seductive power of fortune telling, and perhaps worse, to feelings of nihilism in a world of violence and corruption? Macduff and Malcolm have a lot of really interesting conversations about political corruption in Scotland, and I'd love for you to think about what they say to each other. That could be a way into your Moodle response. They say a lot of really memorable, famous lines. Those might be lines that you could choose to focus on in that scene. Another question you might answer. You don't have to answer all these. These are just, and if you have another thing that you'd rather write about, I don't care. You can write about whatever you want, as always, right? What if the stage, even as it promises to signify and symbolize everything, ultimately signifies nothing? That's a huge threat to Shakespeare because he's trying to create a whole world for us, right? But there's a lot of attention to theatricality in this play and commentary on theatricality and acting. And Lady Macbeth constantly telling Macbeth how to act, how to perform, right? Why is she doing that? What effect does that have on you as a viewer and a reader? So you've got your hands full this week. You're going to read Macbeth. If you don't have your book with you, you can read the Folger online edition. That'll do perfectly fine. And I have the link on our online syllabus, which is on Moodle. It's here as well. I'd love for you to listen while you read. If you click on this YouTube clip, it's an audio version, and this is on your online syllabus as well. Paul Schofield as Macbeth. It's an excellent radio production, and you can have your own personal listening party. If you want to do this with someone in class, you should reach out to them and email them, right? You can listen together and see what you think of the play. This is a short play. It's like half the length of Hamlet, but give it the time that it deserves. It'll take some time for you to underline things, to mark up your book, or to take notes while you're reading online. Post your online response by midnight on Sunday, although I would love it sooner. If you could do it by Saturday or maybe Sunday morning, that would be even better for me because I have to make these videos, frankly, on Sunday. So if you could do it a little earlier, that would be even better. And send me a JPEG of your writing activity. That's how I know that you've watched this video. That's how I know that you've engaged with it. And good luck with all the work. Also be aware that I'm meeting with all of you in small groups this week on Google Meet. That's on your paper guidelines. So you'll be receiving that email reminder. We'll meet with small groups on Monday, Wednesday, Friday of this week at 8 a.m. during our normal class time. I look forward to it. It'll be a pleasure to see you. I've missed you all very much. I hope that you are well, that your families are well, and we will talk soon. And with that, I'm going to say farewell. I'm going to move myself over here, and I'm going to see if I can shut this off. Okay, bye-bye.